Welcome everyone to our Signal customer call. We're excited to have you here today and very excited about a presentation coming up from our guest Oshkosh. Before we get started, just a couple of logistics. As a reminder, your calls are in listen-only mode. We will have a designated Q&A session at the end of Ramiro's presentation, as well as at the end of our product demonstration. But feel free to type your questions in the question panel located in the GoToWebinar console at any time. We also recommend that you expand the viewing window to full screen mode by using the Zoom drop-down box in the upper portion of your screen. This session will be recorded and made available to participants after the call. Now I'd like to introduce Carl Kodalek, who will also introduce our first speaker. Go ahead, Carl.
Thanks, Carrie, and welcome everyone. I'm Carl Kodalek, and I'm the Vice President and General Manager of the Risk Intelligence business for Everbridge. And formerly, I was the CEO of NC4, which was acquired by Everbridge in August of last year, where I had the opportunity to work with Oshkosh Corporation and Ramiro Rodriguez, who started his career at Oshkosh in 2016, where he's a project risk manager supporting over 100 projects. He has a certified associate in project management, and he has been working on a project that NC4 was involved with going back a year ago, called the Global Risk Intelligence Technology, GRIT system, with a cross-functional team. And I've had the opportunity to see multiple demos of that system, and very impressive project they put together. As that project was deployed at Oshkosh earlier this year, he accepted a position as the program manager for supply chain risk in the global procurement and supply chain department at Oshkosh. Prior to Oshkosh, Ramiro worked as a procurement analyst for Fabio Perini, North America, and has been a financial advisor for Northwestern Mutual, and was commissioned in the U.S. Army Reserve as an ordnance officer. He has a degree from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh in supply chain and operations management. So we're gonna have a presentation of their supply chain use case right now, and then after that, we're going to have Wayne Ferguson from Signal talk about the Signal new release. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ramiro for the customer presentation. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just making sure everybody can see my screen okay.
Yep, looks good.
Excellent, thank you. So I just want to thank Everbridge for allowing me the opportunity to share information and sort of the project for Global Risk Intelligence Technology, or GRIT, through Oshkosh Corporation. As you said before, about 2 years ago, this project had started. I was assigned to a project as a project risk manager, which included kind of analyzing some of the risks in which we had within our supply chain. Not long after that, I realized that the project was looking to develop some sort of tool that showed Oshkosh Corporation the risk to the company versus the subjective view of kind of asking what we thought was risky. And that's really where the project took off. We had benchmarked a couple large companies here in the United States, which the idea dawned on me that we could develop something like this in-house. It wasn't long after where I kind of sat with some colleagues in which I'd done some previous sort of freelance work with for data analytics, and I said, gentlemen, do you think we could build this in-house? And they said, yes, I do think we can. And within 3 months, we had a proof of concept going, and it had full support from my current boss here at Oshkosh Corporation. The management here was very intrigued by the project, enough that I was actually given my own department, and now it's kind of taking off after the COVID-19 pandemic. The tool has proven to be very useful to multiple departments within the company and to other organizations. We're currently being benchmarked on this tool for 2 other companies as well. So without further ado, I'll kind of jump into the tool and show the audience kind of what we're looking at. So on our first slide here, what does GRIT do? The GRIT platform is designed to highlight risk associated on a global scale. And what we really tried to capture are incidents using NC4 along with social media, financial stability, weather. We're also going to be using cybersecurity, and we also use our own procurement software as well. And the idea is to help Oshkosh Corporation as an enterprise really manage the risk in near real time, using these different data points in order to geographically look at risk associated to our supply chain, and then understand the mitigation that comes with it, and really disseminate those plans down to each segment as we see fit. Within Oshkosh Corporation, we have 4 major segments: our defense segments, our access equipment, our fire truck, fire and emergency segment, and as well as our commercial segment, which is refuse and concrete type mixers. The tool is intended to simplify the way we quantify risk value associated with risk. And what I really mean by that is, if we have, for example, a tropical depression which just formed today in the Gulf of Mexico and is headed near Louisiana and toward Florida, we want to know which suppliers are at risk in association with that path of the storm. In order to quantify those risks, we're taking our procurement software and saying, what purchase orders do we currently have in our system? When are they due? And do we have alternative supply chain vendors that can provide us those same components that are not nearly as risky? Or can we simply postpone the current purchase orders we have in order to avoid any further delay to our supply chain? As most companies or most customers here on the call today can imagine, with the COVID-19 pandemic, any further disruption of the supply chain can be severely detrimental to any business in any space. So it's quite valuable to various departments within the organization. The tool also helps us merge supply chain related databases, which is really the key to how this works, and that you'll see in the demonstration very shortly here. The tool currently today is being used by several departments to include purchasing, supplier quality, logistics, risk management, operations, finance. We've even taken it a little bit step further to do forecasting, sales, as well as inventory management. This is the general structure for how the data really works. The first piece you'll see, and we'll talk about on the next slide, is the supplier financial information that's provided by one of our APIs. We also use NC4 for 2 accounts on GRIT specifically. One is the NC4 incident and flashpoint data. We also use it for social media data mining, in which we're scanning roughly 600 suppliers for multiple terms and associations, to include Twitter, the dark web, and Reddit. It's been very, very useful, especially for supplier shutdowns during the entire COVID-19 pandemic. We then link all of that to our internal procurement data, again, to quantify the value of those risks and what they really mean in terms of risk to the company. In future state, we'll include cybersecurity data, which we're currently in discussion and in negotiations with the vendor, and it should be plugged into our system relatively soon. All of these APIs and data points are then plugged into our data cluster, which then in turn is developed in our dashboard and then open to license within our company. The beauty of GRIT is that because it's homegrown and it's been built by our own employees here at the company, there's an infinite amount of license that we can open up to each one. So if tomorrow I wanted to give opening to all 15,000 plus employees at the Oshkosh enterprise, I could. Kind of go over some of the icons that you'll see in the demonstration in the next couple of slides. But all the blue icons you see will be suppliers. Each supplier will show location, name of supplier, yearly spend, line of business, and then a quick glimpse into the financial aspect for that supplier. The fallout of COVID-19 pandemic is really going to be dependent on liquidity and cash assets of some of our suppliers and their ability to make payment as those come due. So we're very much leveraging some of that financial data for the suppliers to give us really a forecast for where we can expect trouble if we see any, but more importantly, to work with our suppliers and vendors to try to make business work during this extremely difficult time. Any supplier that we see within the grit tool that has a yellow triangle is quite simply a query in which we've written to say if we have certain NC4 incidents within a particular area, normally within a certain distance, to flag that supplier as being at risk, and in which in the future we're going to develop an output alert to certain commodity managers, individuals within purchasing, and potentially operations to let them know ahead of time that there is a supplier at risk given a particular incident or circumstance. Some of the incidents that you will see will include risk incidents for infrastructure, meteorological to include flooding, any type of weather-related incidents. We have security incidents as well, and hazmat. And again, these are all provided through the NC4 risk incident data that we draw with through the API. Some other incidents you'll see. Oh, excuse me, I kind of went a little fast there. We have everything from fire structures, that includes fire alarms, anything that we see as far as structure fires, industrial fires, brush fires, even that we saw quite a few last year within the California region. We also see other incidents include evacuations, as most people are reading today with riots and protests. This is becoming quite a hot topic on our map and something that we're looking very heavily into. The same can be said for transportation. Here's one we see here for waterway closure. We've also seen one for public transportation. A good example would be India during the COVID-19 pandemic. All public transportation was shut down, which made it very difficult for business to go in and out. So we saw a lot of those incidents come through. Geophysical to include earthquakes. About 3 days ago, there was a pretty significant earthquake in Mexico, which actually affected one of our suppliers. And we were able to see that through our NC4 incident as well. We have things like labor strikes, energy strikes, anything within the business world that has to do with labor. And then we have structural building collapses, things of that nature, and finally global flashpoints, which we see. On the next slide, we'll be going through a quick demonstration in which I'll talk a little bit through the video about what we're actually seeing. I apologize that there's no audio for the video, but nonetheless, you'll be able to get the gist of what the global risk intelligence technology does. So in this video, we'll go through a few areas in which GRIT highlights and works well for the Oshkosh Corporation Supply Chain Risk Department. This first section in which you'll see a highlight an area in which a tropical depression formed, and this was not that long ago, similar to the one in the Gulf of Mexico, in which I had said is moving north, and it's going to head for some suppliers. This one in particular was actually moving northwest, as you can see. So I'll highlight a few suppliers you can see right there within the area, and it's very quick for us to identify suppliers that may be in the path of that tropical storm. As you can see, with a click of a button, it's very easy to see yearly spend and some financial information as well. The next incident we're going to look at is actually something that occurred in my hometown. A semi-truck actually struck a transformer and knocked out the power for the entire city and actually parts of another city. So we actually had disruption for another supplier, for a supplier, I should say, in which we had to actually find an alternative source. So this is actually a real-world event in which this happened. This particular supplier wanted to open up a purchase order and kind of see what we had. GRIT also works for a sourcing technique in which that it can quickly look through our procurement database to see if we've ever had any legacy suppliers. And what I mean by that is anyone we've ever purchased this component from previously. It will show the last time we bought the component, the last time what we paid for that component last time, and the number of purchase orders in the last 3 years. That process normally takes about an hour to an hour and a half to look at information, which we can do very quickly now with the global risk intelligence technology. The next bit here we're going to look at, it kind of highlights what we can do with NC4 Signal. In this instance, we're just looking at a particular social media post that we use for global risk intelligence technology. You can see within moments, it scans the API and returns back multiple sources from social media discussing a particular vendor. And in this case, I actually talked about another vendor we have for Workday and Salesforce. Grit works in such a way that once I click it, I can be directed directly to the social media post within Twitter, and I can go from there if I want to dig further down to see the relationship between the two. And finally, we have a full Google Maps API integration deployed for Grit. This is an instance in where one of our supplier quality members actually wanted to know what the building looked like in which they were going to visit. Because it has a fully integrated Google Maps API, I can actually click and drag and get a street view of the building in which he was going to visit. So when he's on site, there's no delay, and when he's trying to find the office. So this concludes the short demonstration of the global risk intelligence technology. Again, in the very near future, Grit will be implementing a cybersecurity score along with on-time delivery and PPM for each supplier. We'll just add some of the technology in which we have. We also have another technology built at Oshkosh Corporation, which now can show forecasts for individual components and is also linked to work orders. So to say this another way, in the near future, I'll be able to tell you exactly what line will be impacted by a particular risk, on what date it'll be impacted, for what particular model or vehicle, and what specific customer, and a delivery date to be affected. This concludes my presentation for the Global Risk Intelligence Technology. Thank you for watching, and thank you again, Everbridge, for having me. And at this time, I'll take any questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Ramiro. That was an excellent presentation. Just as a reminder, you can type any questions in the questions panel located in your GoToWebinar console, and I can read it aloud for you. First question we have is, do you use historical data for predictive analytics, like, for example, floods?
Excellent. When the project first kicked off, it was the first thing that we talked about. But because the project was brand new, we knew we had to gather about a year to 2 years worth of data before we can do that. To answer your question more specifically, absolutely we'll be looking at that, especially for people like myself who love data and predictive type analytics. So we're currently writing the algorithms to actually do that. So for example, if we see high floods or high hurricanes during a certain month period, we may change the course of those purchase orders to say maybe the West Coast for just those 3 months to avoid any disruption at all. Great question, and thank you for asking.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, how do you vet the information from social media to ensure accuracy?
Vetting the information right now, to be totally honest, is currently done by just myself. Because the department is done, there's just me. When I see the information, I have to do a lot of kind of manual looking. That's where one of my colleagues, Andrea, comes in, and she'll be assisting me in the future to kind of help distinguish the different departments. So in a perfect world, what we're going to do in the future is each segment within our business will have another position like myself. So when one of these events pop or sort of shows itself, that particular segment, if it's one of their suppliers, will do the vetting for us and then communicate back up to corporate, and in which once we'll validate the information, then we kind of push it out. But right now it's a very manual process. The hope is that in the future we can use something like VBA, or excuse me, not a VBA. We'll be using automation to basically do that kind of data mining for us to validate the information.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question, how long did it take you to implement Grit, for starting from requirements through to implementation?
So believe it or not, to implement Grit took us about, I'll say, 8 months total. The two companies we benchmarked, one of them had taken about 9 years and 8 PhDs. The other one had taken about 6 years, and I believe a team of 14, if I remember correctly. We were very lucky in that all of our sort of bosses in which we reported to, this is the first time any of us had been on a project where they said, go ahead and run. There was no panel to make decisions. There was no, this is a budget, you have to stick within these guidelines. They said run, and we ran, and within 8 months, we had Grit up and running.
That's incredible, congratulations. Another question here, do you use weather alerts, for example, tornado warnings, storm warnings?
Yes, we absolutely do, and actually it's something we depend very heavily on. The great news is that NC4 incidents does provide a lot of those. So every day we're seeing hurricane warnings, tornado touchdowns. We actually also have an account with the NC4 Risk Center, which we also run alerts through a separate email account to show us severe weather as well. So yes, we rely very heavily on weather, as it's, Mother Nature very unpredictable as far as disruptions in supply chain. Thank you for asking.
Excellent. All right, another question just came in. Are you monitoring your parts shipments with your transportation vendors while they travel on the road through trucks or container cargo?
That's a very good question. So we're trying to figure that out. More specifically, I'm trying to figure that out. The hardest part is that we can get tracking information, but if the vehicle itself doesn't have some sort of tracking mechanism, it's hard to tell where the vehicle is in real time. The best solution I can find currently is that there are vendors that offer an API for sea freight vessels. So I'm working on an API also to include sea freight, in which I'll be able to tell what's on the boat. Again, what PO does it belong to, what segment does it belong to, what vehicle, and then so on and so forth. So I'll be able to track the ship itself, but once the ship, say, reaches, one of the ports, and then from the port to our actual location, it's very difficult to track it beyond a tracking number. So it is something that we're currently exploring and working on, but currently we do not.
Excellent. Okay. Is cargo theft an issue?
We have not seen cargo theft, or at least not that I'm aware of, as far as an issue. So yeah, no, not something that I'm seeing, but it's a little beyond my department, to be completely honest. So I couldn't say for certainty, but as of right now, not any issue that we've seen thus far.
Thank you. Another question is, how do you envision cyber information will come into play?
So our cybersecurity information, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to purchase 2 accounts through a couple vendors. One is going to track our certification as far as keeping up to date on things like CMMC and ISO certifications for our vendors. And then our second subscription we've purchased was going to scan things like IP addresses and vulnerabilities that you can track on the World Wide Web. They provide a simplified risk score in which that'll kind of bake into our overall risk equation. Right now we have them sort of segregated for financial, just risk incidents alone, PPM, and then on-time delivery, and then cybersecurity. In the future, those 4 points will create sort of an equation that'll give it sort of just a general risk score, high, medium, low, and then we'll be able to determine it through that. But to answer your question more specifically, the cybersecurity will be scanning external controls, which is what you can track on the World Wide Web, and then internal controls, which is internal surveys and certifications needed for cybersecurity.
Excellent, thank you. All right, looks like those are all the questions that we have at this time. Ramiro, thank you again. Excellent presentation. And now I'll turn it over to Wayne.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you, Ramiro. That was brilliant and great work. So just bear with me when I'll get the PowerPoint thing back running again. And then have to do that thing. So yeah, excellent work, Ramiro. Thank you, and great questions. I had a few myself, and I might touch base with you later on about that. So now what I'm going to cover is the recent updates to NC4 Signal. It's been a little while since we've had an NC4 Signal webinar, so there's quite a few things to go through. So just to make things easy, I'm going to cover them in the PowerPoint, in a series of PowerPoint slides. If anyone wants to see an actual demo of these updates, then feel free to reach out either to your account manager or to me or to Jessica. I'm happy to do a one-on-one session and drill into them in a bit more detail, but there's quite a few, as you'll see, because it's been a little while since we've had a webinar. The first series of updates we've done is really around translation. So we've done some updates that will enable you, or do enable you, to translate keywords. So you're now going to be able to set up a search and set up various layers across different languages. So the concept is you have some keywords that you're looking for, you can put those keywords in, and then you can translate those keywords to a different language. So in the examples I'm showing here, I've got my default language, which in my case is English, and then I've translated, and I've got a layer which is in Vietnamese and a layer which is in French. So you're building up a search looking to return multiple languages, and you're specifically looking for words in those other languages. Some of you may know we leverage the Microsoft Translator service, and that currently has over 70 languages that we can translate to and from, for that matter. So that's been released, and that's now available, and that's available within the query builder, and you can just create your layers and set the translation language, as you can see up towards the top on these screenshots here. The other thing we have released, which is for our platinum customers, is the ability to auto-translate results that you may be receiving. So what that will enable you to do is set up a live stream view to translate all the results that are coming in to your chosen language, which in my case I've set as English. So that will automatically happen. All the results that are coming through NC4 Signal will be translated to English. You can still do the manual translation. So if you see an individual post you wish to translate, you can still click on the globe and do that translation manually. But if you set this, and this is available in the search options, if you set this, then the results for that search will automatically be translated. And just for a laugh, if you want to mess with one of your colleagues, set one of their searches to translate to something like Klingon, which I think is one of the languages. Another series of enhancements we've been working on and we've worked on are around our cyber feed. So the cyber enhancements, there's a few additional options, and all our customers who have the gold subscription or higher that have cyber feed, you're now able to search for text within an image. So the first additional parameter that was made available is the ability to select image text, and you can put in a word. How is that relevant, or why is that useful? You could be looking for people who are creating, for example, a phishing site, or people who may be inappropriately using the brand or the company name. So you can put in the keyword field, you put in the name, your company name, or maybe a brand that you have as part of your brand family, and then we'll look for any images that are on in the cyber feeds, depending on which cyber feeds you've got, and looking for images with those particular words as part of the image. Another thing we've released is the open web option. Now, you're always getting the open web as part of the cyber feed, but we've actually extracted that to enable you to look specifically at open web. What is open web when it comes to the cyber feed? That's things like Payspin, 4chan, Gab. So it's those conversation sites and sites where cyber activity is being held that are open, so they're on the open web, but we're enabling you to look either specifically for those, or in some cases you may wish to exclude those. So maybe you're not interested in information from the likes of 4chan, so therefore you can just set up a dark web search or a search across the other networks that you may have. Another feature in the cyber feeds is the published date. What that enables you to do is look for information that may be around a specific date or that goes back to a certain date. General rule of thumb is when you're looking for data in the cyber feed, the data will be current to about 2 months old. But if you're thinking about looking for something that might be older than that, so maybe you are looking for a historic breach or some historic conversations, you can in effect push the system or force the system to go back in time. So you might want to put a date of, let's say, January 1, 2020, and then you'll see any relevant results from January 1, 2020 onwards. In the Twitter feeds, another thing we've added is the ability to exclude a user. So where that's particularly useful is you might have a geo search setup or a search setup, and you're getting a lot of traffic from a user that is just not relevant or not providing you content that is of interest. And a good example of that is often you'll get people that are posting jobs or vacancies, and it's quite useful to be able to exclude those and reduce the noise that's coming from those users. And as you can see, you can put multiple user, and that's a Twitter username. You can put multiple Twitter usernames in, really just to help you reduce the noise and focus on the information that matters. There's a couple of changes we've made to the live stream view. The most relevant one for everyone is that now we have an indicator if there's an alert set for that particular search. And as you see here, the indicator changes color depending on the level of the alert. But so in this case, we have a low level alert set on that particular search, or a medium or high. It's just a good way to very quickly see if the search has got an alert. Do you remember if you set an alert on that, or if someone set an alert on that, and in which case who has set the alert, who's that alert going to, and so on. So and we're looking to make a couple of other improvements to the live stream view, which you'll see in the next couple of releases. In the flagging area, the ability to search flags, and if you're looking for content within the flags, as you can see here, I've searched for the term happy, and I'm seeing a post with happy in it, and that post, or sorry, that keyword is highlighted. And I'll talk more about highlighting in a second, but so you can now search and you can look for content within the items that you have flagged, and that content is going to be highlighted, or the relevant content for the information you're looking for, that will be highlighted. So another area we've been working on, and we're continuing to work on, is the integration. So a number of you will know we have integration with the risk intelligence feed from Everbridge, formerly NC4 Risk Center. So you're able to see NC4 incidents within Signal, and we're able to trigger a NC4 Signal search from a Risk Center email alert. We're also working on integration with the VCC product from Everbridge. So there's a couple of features that we're working on, and we're hoping to be able to release fairly soon, which is the ability to create incidents within the Everbridge VCC offering from NC4 Signal. The first of those is the ability to manually create a risk event. So what this is if I'm looking at a Signal live stream view, in this case this is a search, this is the one I showed earlier on, although you can see I turned the alert off when I grabbed this screenshot. And from here I can push, so I can choose to see a post, and I might believe that that post is of relevance, or I need to have a risk event associated with that post within VCC. I can choose to select to push a risk event, and once I've added some additional attributes that are required by VCC and save that that post, then it will create a post within VCC. So that's the SaaS version of VCC. So that integration has been worked on, and we're just going through some testing, and will be available to NC4 Signal and Everbridge VCC customers in the not too distant future. The other thing we're working on is the ability to set up an alert to automatically create a risk event within VCC. So very similar to the manual process. What it is when you set up an alert, and it will trigger, at this stage it triggers on the any, not the activity, so just on the any, and then I can set the settings for that particular alert, and that will trigger and create a risk event based on what may be happening on that search and why that alert has been triggered. And then you can see down here that could include, for example, the post content as well. So you can trigger an alert. That alert will then in time be able to automatically create a risk event within Everbridge VCC. So that's some of the integration work, and there's a bunch more integration work we're looking to do, and we'll be testing throughout the rest of 2020. There's also a number of other features and functions we're working on that we're earmarking for, hopefully for the Q3 timeframe. So sort of July, August, September, and that starts with highlighting keywords in the live stream view. And I know a number of people have been asking for this for some time, myself included, and with some recent technology updates, we're now working and looking to see how we can make sure that when you're searching for various keywords and the results are coming in that are associated with those keywords, we will actually highlight the text, the content in that live stream view. And that's just a mock-up that I've done there. There's another feature we're bringing in for our platinum customers, which is data breach detection. What that is, that's another data layer or data source, which you can see here. And that source has a number of parameters. It has things like leak names and file names. It also has, similar to the cyber source, it has the ability to search on entities such as emails, phone numbers, credit cards, social security numbers. It adds the ability to search on passports. So from a perspective of the likes of executive protection, are the personal details or the passport details, for example, of key executives being shared online? Have they been breached? Are they being shared? Are there account names that you might be interested in? So this is an additional feature that it's available for our platinum, or will be available for our platinum customers, really aimed at identifying where there has been potential breaches. So we're already seeing in our testing email addresses being published on the dark web where people have got various account details or data dumps for sale and so on and so forth. So it's a build on the cyber feed, but this is really specifically focused at potentially identifying where there may have been a data breach. We'll also be working this year on, obviously, since the acquisition of NC4 by Everbridge, then NC4 Signal is our current brand, and Signal is currently seen and branded as NC4. The other thing we're working on is obviously bringing that in line with the rest of the Everbridge products and using the Everbridge name. So we're working on a new look and feel for NC4 Signal. So at some point in time, NC4 Signal will migrate across and become Everbridge Signal. Still obviously been very strongly associated with NC4, the history and the fantastic work that's gone in to the offering from NC4 and the various integrations with the likes of Risk Center and so on. But we will be looking to make some changes in that regard as we move forward this year as well. That's a cosmetic change, but it's worth noting that there may be at some point some changes that you'll see. And that's it from a perspective of what has happened and what is happening with Signal. There's still a lot of development that we've got planned. I've just shown a couple of things for Q3. I'm looking up on the wall and the roadmap is quite long, but there's a lot of exciting and innovative stuff that we're looking to bring forward. So hopefully we'll be able to talk a bit about that more in our next Signal update. Any questions?
Thank you, Wayne. Just as a reminder, you can type your questions in the questions panel in your GoToWebinar console. One question here, Wayne, is who can create an alert on a search?
Basically, any user can create an alert as long as they're not a read-only user. So we have different user types. The majority of users will be what we call a power analyst, and they have full ability to create searches, edit searches, set up alerts, run reports and so on. And then in some cases we have read-only user, and some organizations use that quite extensively. A read-only user can receive an alert but can't set up an alert.
Okay, thank you. And do alerts send a notification external to Signal?
Certainly can. There's the option with alerts to send that alert to either yourself or other users within Signal, or to an external email address. And that email address could be another person, or it could be, for example, a distribution group, maybe gsoc@gsoc.com or something. So you can send to an external email address, you can send an alert to an external email address, and then obviously when we release the integration with VCC, that alert will actually also be able to create an incident or risk event within VCC as well.
Thank you. All right, another question. Is there any plans to allow updated topics to then automatically include the updated terms in any search they're utilized in?
Very good question, and the answer is yes, there are plans. That is on our roadmap. We are looking at how we can do that at the moment. It's a really good idea, and it sounds relatively simple until you start thinking about the business rules around it. So that's what we're working through. Technologically, it's not overly complex, but it's really figuring out how we apply those business rules. For example, if I've got a topic that says looking for A, B, and C, and then in future I want to change that to D, or sorry, I want to add D, I want to apply that topic to my previous edges, or do I? So the question really becomes, how do we apply those changes? Yes, we can apply them, but in some cases you may not want to retrospectively apply them. So we're working through that, and it's certainly on the roadmap. We are continuing to define those requirements, and hopefully we'll have more on that in Q3.
Excellent. All right, those are all the questions that we have at this time.
Okay, just a couple of other events worth noting. There's the Everbridge Virtual User Group coming up on July 21, I think it was, Gary.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next Signal webinar, we're going to target August the 4th for that. So it's another few weeks away, or in fact, middle of Q3. The idea behind that is we're doing these updates. We do them a little bit less frequently than we were last year, really to give you a chance to test the functionality out, and we can drill deeper into the functionality, and hopefully we can have another fantastic customer presentation like we had from Ramiro today. So thank you, Ramiro, and thank you, Carrie, for the help with the webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. This concludes our Signal customer call. Thanks for joining, and we look forward to seeing you at a future event.